Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a look at MOTU Origins Wave 3, She-Ra. She-Ra is an interesting figure in this series because, unlike most of the other characters released under the Origins banner, She-Ra never actually had a MOTU toy. She never had a figure released in that particular line in this particular style. Even though she was first introduced via, like a He-Man movie, her first toy actually came within her own toy line, and as such was a bit different than your standard He-Man figures. So this figure, interestingly, takes the MOTU Origins style and applies it to She-Ra's design, modifying it from her more traditional look and giving it some details as if this was like a prototype design for her. So it doesn't look exactly how, the character would appear in the show or her own toy line. Also, it's important to point out that there are two versions of the She-Ra toy. The first one was released as part of the 2020 PowerCon convention and was notable for having actual realistic blonde hair, kind of like a Barbie doll. This is the standard retail version of that toy, which is largely the same, the biggest difference being a new head with just molded blonde hair. So a little less premium, but pretty close. And, as much as I'd love to have the PowerCon one, I'm so late to the game that it's not very likely unless I want to fork over all kinds of money. So I'm satisfied with the plastic-haired version. It's good enough. Anyway, if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at She-Ra's packaging. Then we'll open it up. We'll see She-Ra herself, check out her poseability, her accessories, all that cool stuff. Naturally, I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons today. And then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. Now, She-Ra comes in what is largely the same packaging as the other figures I reviewed. However, you might notice some subtle differences. For one, may not be able to tell too much from this angle, but at this angle, you can see my package is pretty mangled. Like, really, really beat up to the point where, like, the bubble's coming off the bottom and I gotta, hold the paperwork inside. So this is part of a large batch of figures I ordered from an online retailer all the way in Spain. And it took a long time to get here. Got held up in the export process. And when I got this box today, I opened it up and all of these toys, their packaging is just mushed. Like, they just took them all, shoved them in a box that was not big enough to fit the dimensions of these, and just kind of bent them and crammed them in there. So I'm not happy about that. I'm probably not doing business with this vendor anymore. For that reason, and just the fact that it's, a long way to get it imported here. It's not cheap. The shipping was like $40. And it also presents another, albeit minor, problem. All the toys that I received feature the international version of the packaging. And you might think, well, what's the big deal? It's very lacking compared to the English-only packaging. For one, you'll see you got her name here, She-Ra, and then there's no title underneath where normally there would be. They swap out the retro play, modern articulation thing for includes comic in 3 different languages, which not a big deal. But I think where it really suffers is here on the back. So you still get the really just gorgeous, gorgeous artwork that comes with all of these figures. However, you're going to notice there's no flavor text anymore. Instead, you get this little speech bubble here that just goes on to say the whole mini comic included in a ton more languages. So you don't even get a description of the character, you just get the artwork. And, like I said, gorgeous artwork. I absolutely love this. The colors on her, the way they kind of gradient into each other, just really, really well done. And again, I love this kind of faux retro take on the character where, they kind of gave her a Masters of the Universe style design. And honestly, I think it makes for a very cool look. Also, you'll see they have the call-outs of her play features, but again, there's no text, just pictures. So, it doesn't really even tell you what you're doing. Now, we know this one, right? Twist into battle poses, some blah, whatever. Now this, what they're doing is showing off the fact that her little crown thing can flip upside down and become a masquerade-style mask for her face. And, that might be a little harder to figure out because it's just a picture. Okay. We also get the cross cells for this wave, and of course the ever-present He-Man Skeletor. But again, you also notice it's very lacking in text. There's no, new for 21 or anything like that. So you get the He-Man, Skeletor, She-Ra herself, right? And then you also get Roboto, who I got with this delivery of figures, Zodak, who I still don't have, and then Merman, who I also just received. So expect reviews for those two shortly. And overall, you know, it is, to me, markedly inferior packaging where they don't have the flavor text or anything like that. And it's a big issue that Hasbro has because, like, they went all international packaging with their stuff, with their Transformers. All their Transformers international packaging. Because of that, when you see them do something like reissues of G1 characters, their bios, their tech specs, and all that are greatly shortened so they can fit several different languages on there. And it's really present in the Beast Wars reissues, like the Optimus Primal. It's just like a snippet of his original bio, and it's really dissatisfying. Like, I get it. They want to make packaging that works for, you know, all the different markets. But when you're recreating a classic bit of packaging, it really hurts the authenticity. Like, looking at something like those G1 reissues, or looking at, you know, especially this, where it's just stripped of text because they just got to keep cramming the same sentence in there all over the packaging, that drives me nuts. I hate it. So, yeah, not a fan of the international packaging at all. It really just puts a damper on the excitement. And then, of course, it doesn't help that this thing is just super, super mangled. Like, I've never received a package in such bad shape. And that's saying a lot, because I've ordered through Amazon, and they're terrible. Well, I think that's enough griping about the packaging. I think I've made my point there. So let's go ahead and open this up now, take a look at her comic, and then see She-Ra. Here's the mini comic that's included with She-Ra, and because of the international packaging, there's no dialogue or anything. There's the Masters of the Universe logo, and that's about it. And then everything else just pictures. So it's kind of hard to know exactly what's going on. You can see He-Man and Roboto flying in. They're fighting a giant squid monster thing. See Skeletor floating there for whatever reason. Looks like Merman's commanding the squid monster. He-Man jumps out of the ship. I'm assuming Roboto does too. Let's see, Skeletor is using magic to try to open a door. He-Man follows after him. Skeletor goes into some freaky pocket dimension thing. And, I don't know, he's trying to do something with it. And then there's old Zodak like, oh no, stop it, don't do that. He tries to zap him, and Skeletor laughs at him. And then He-Man and She-Ra show up. I'm guessing She-Ra just pops out of one of those dimensional gateways. They both fight Skeletor at the same time. Roboto shows up, getting attacked by that Kraken thing. He breaks Skeletor's staff. Oh, there's a crystal on it, so he breaks the crystal. And Skeletor is defeated, and then Zodak's like, okay, bye. And then you have what I'm guessing is a silhouette of Hordak in the background, I guess being some sort of ominous setup for future stories. And that's about it. Not entirely sure what's happening because it's all very weird, but it's pretty cool. And you get a nice little slew of different characters in there. And, of course, on the back, we get our cross-sells once again. And now we get to see She-Ra herself with all of her accessories. She's got her trademark sword. She's got a shield. She's got her collar accent thing / mask when you turn it upside down. She has this little belt going across her waist, which it seems the only way to actually take this part off is to pop her in half there at the waist joint and pull it off, because it doesn't like unclip or anything. And you can see she's got a lot of fabric goods. The skirt area is like a clear mesh, along with these little like cloth pauldrons. And then she's got this long flowing red cape. And speaking of long and flowing, this is her hair. It's made out of rubber, as opposed to being realistic doll-like hair, like the PowerCon one was. That's the only real notable difference between this version and that one. This also doesn't come with the little brush for the hair, because it wouldn't make much sense, right? You can't brush rubber. But overall, I think she looks really, really good. She's very flashy. And she has quite a few accessories that she's just naturally decked out in. Now, of course, we can take this little collar thing off. We just want to get a better look at her head sculpt and her face. Again, she's got very long flowing hair there. Very nice, very pretty. It's probably not something you'll ever hear me say in a review again. Pretty. But we can always go ahead and attach this thing upside down to create her masquerade-like appearance, which I think was on the original She-Ra toy, if I remember right, or some versions of She-Ra. I'm not sure what the significance of the mask is. Haven't watched much of like classic She-Ra or anything, so I don't know why that's there. But it's just added play value, so it's all good as far as I'm concerned. Now, I will say the whole mesh thing is a little odd and a little surprising to me. Doesn't match her on-screen appearance at all, and it doesn't really seem very practical, but at the same time it does help lend her a He-Man / MOTU inspired appearance because, well, MOTU characters tend to walk around like they're half naked, so she just kind of blends in now with the other denizens of Eternia. Alright, looking at She-Ra's Poseability, her head is on the same double ball joint that all the other MOTU figures are, or most of them anyway. The hair surprisingly doesn't get in the way too badly. For one, it's just molded pretty well, and also it's rubber, so it has a lot of give to it, so that's always nice. She's got universal shoulders, elbow bend and swivel, wrist swivel and bending, full waist swivel, universal hips, knee bend and swivel, boot swivel, something I always found kind of odd, and then ankle rocking and rotation. So she's got the full gamut of posability that an Origins toy is typically in possession of, and she just looks really good. So overall, she seems to be a very satisfactory addition to the line here. So for a comparison, here are the other two figures that had been released up to this point. We have our Wave 1 toys Teela and Evil-Lyn. Now, Teela and Evil-Lyn are basically just a head swap and recolor of each other as far as, their actual bodies. And She-Ra here has surprisingly very little in common with them, which is kind of odd for a MOTU line, right? Because they're known for reusing parts and all that. But the only parts of her that seem to be the same are the forearms and hands. A lot of the parts that are different are kind of obvious, right? Obviously, a different chest sculpt here, right? The upper arms don't have the bands across them. Different little pelvic area too, because of the different outfit. Obviously, different boots, right? But surprisingly, even her thigh pieces are different from these two. It's something I didn't notice right away until I got to actually look at them all side by side. But the thigh sculpt is quite different, especially when you look at the knees, which are much more realistic looking than these weird, like, kind of flap things they have going on here. And then the inner thigh area where, as on the Wave 1 figures, you have this kind of strange, unnatural looking indent right there. She doesn't have that. So it looks like they kind of went back to the drawing board and redid the upper leg parts for female characters. Because even though She-Ra is the first place we see this, she's not the last. And you'll see here in coming reviews and stuff that future female characters, even ones that are like direct recolors of these two, end up swapping out the upper leg pieces for the new ones that we see here. Which I think is a good move, because one thing I'm really not crazy about with these two figures is that their legs just look very weird and unnatural. So I think that was definitely a change for the better, and does help She-Ra just stand out really as a quality figure here in this line. Here's a group shot of She-Ra with her brother He-Man. She-Ra wielding her sword of protection, He-Man wielding the sword of power. And they're pretty good compliments to each other. They both have the whole sword and board thing going on. This also kind of reminds me of a point about the new Revelation cartoon, the second half of that first season. A lot of people were wondering why the Sword of Power made Evil-Lyn like really big and hulking when she used it. And they point out like, well, She-Ra doesn't get big. Well, remember, these are two different swords, right? The Sword of Protection, as far as I know anyway, has never been known to like turn someone into a hulking brute like the Sword of Power does. So I think that's just something that's intrinsic to this particular sword. So, I mean, there's plenty of things to criticize that show and that season for, but I don't think that's one of them. I think people are just kind of missing the point that any iteration we've seen of somebody actually utilizing this sword and calling its power, they do get really big. So I think it's just normal. I don't think there was any plot hole or anything there. I say there because there were plenty of plot holes. But I'll digress from bashing that show a little bit. I will say these two, they work together, right? They're the right scale and everything. Very different aesthetics, though. I mean, He-Man is done in very earthy colors, very barbarian-esque. She-Ra is definitely something out of like a high fantasy space opera kind of show, which isn't a bad thing. I think it's good that despite their parallels, each one of them is still, unique and stands apart from the other. And this completes our look at MOTU Origins She-Ra. I've got to say, I find myself really liking this thing. It's different. It's not the kind of toy I would normally buy, right? It very much is a lot closer to the Barbie school of design than something I would normally pick up. But I got to say, her inclusion in the MOTU line, I think, really helps diversify the line. And I don't mean that like corporate speak. I mean like literally, it makes for a different kind of toy that can exist within the same toy line as the likes of He-Man, Skeletor, Triclops. She's just a very, very different character. Very feminine, very flashy character, and there's no reason she can't exist in that world too. So I think she really excels at setting herself apart. I really, really dig the cloth goods that are on her. The cape is awesome and it works really well. The transparent, like mesh parts of the costume, a little weird, but different in a way, and different's always good. I like the sword design, the shield, all that. Even the weird little collar that you can flip upside down to make a mask. I mean, it's cool. It's its own thing. It looks a bit different than, what you would see on the TV show, but usually the show is designed around the toys and not the other way around anyway. I love the improvements they made to the thigh pieces here. They are 10 times better than the stuff we got in Wave 1, and I'm glad that they're going to keep that going for future female characters because it just looks so much better. It's so much more aesthetically appealing. I can't talk today. It just looks much more realistic than whatever weird misshapeness was going on before. The boots are cool. I mean, everything about her is just pretty cool and unique. Yeah, I think it's a shame I wasn't able to pick up the PowerCon one because I wasn't collecting when the last PowerCon came along. So, I get the one that's a little bit different, has just rubber hair instead of the more realistic hair, but that's not a huge thing to me anyway. If anything, it's one less part of the toy that can get messed up somehow. I imagine, having that realistic... I don't even know what they actually use for, like, the quote-unquote realistic Barbie-like hair. I'm not sure what that's actually made out of. Hopefully not real hair. That'd be weird. But I imagine that probably doesn't keep too well, especially in, like, storage and stuff. So maybe the rubber's better anyway. So, yeah, I think she's pretty cool. Do I recommend picking her up? Yeah, if you're a big MOTU fan and you like, getting all the big characters. And She-Ra, eventually became a very big character to the point of having her own show. So I think she's a pretty important part of MOTU history. Will you be able to find one currently, seeing as I picked her up so far after the fact? Maybe. Again, I had to order mine from overseas, and I was not happy with, what I eventually got. A completely banged up box, international packaging that was way less interesting than the regular, like, North American version. So you'll probably, unfortunately, have to overpay for her and maybe even import her from somewhere else. So just keep that in mind. But if you don't mind paying the extra or tracking her down, I think you'll enjoy her in your collection. She really stands out in the crowd. Of course, that is just my opinion on She-Ra, so now I want to know what you all think in the comments section. Do you like this toy? Do you think she makes a good addition to the MOTU collection, or is she too weird, different, or maybe you don't want to pick up any toys that weren't part of the original vintage line? Any and all feedback is always welcome in that comment section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me today for this look at Masters of the Universe Origins Wave 3 figure, She-Ra. And with all that said, I will see you next time.